What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video on the Lockdown Defense Sports Network. I am your host for today's video, Young RG, Robert Garcia, as Coach likes to call me. And in today's episode, we are going to be continuing our series of the AFC North, AFC North. Spoiler alert, we're continuing our series of the AFC Headliners series, just taking a look at each individual AFC team. Of course, we will be doing the NFC as well following this. But just taking a look at each AFC team, going through each division and asking one big question for each team and, kind of seeing if it can dictate their season or not, or will it dictate, Jesus Christ, their season or not. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Obviously, like I mentioned, the AFC North team. So first team up is, of course, the winners of the AFC North the last year. The Baltimore Ravens. So what is the biggest question the Ravens need to answer themselves? And this one, it's pretty straightforward. Can they get it done in the playoffs? I mean, I think we've seen time and time again that they can handle this division with ease. I think the Bengals, have some questions of their own. I think all the teams in this division, besides the Ravens, roster-wise, have some questions of their own. But the Ravens obviously look like the most complete team in this entire division. So it's just up to, Harbaugh, Lamar, the offensive line, the outside weapons, the defense. I mean, we've seen time and time again that they're the number one seed. They're the favorites going into the playoffs, and they just unfortunately fall short. And it's, obviously been one of Lamar's biggest arguments for why he's not a top quarterback is because he can't get it done in the playoffs. He has 2 MVPs and he has yet to make it to a conference championship game. So there's obviously a lot to unpack there. The Ravens are a extremely well-run organization. This is not me trying to bash on the Ravens at all. I just think that the Ravens, it's almost to the point where like you're so good for so long that what other teams would consider successful seasons is a terrible season for you. That sounds really bad to say, but at this point, the Ravens are Super Bowl or bust. If you watch First Things First, Chris Broussard says all the time, they're SBOB, they're Super Bowl or bust. So that is ultimately the biggest question for the Ravens this year is, can they get it done in the playoffs? I think you look at, the draft picks they had this past year. You take a look at, the improved offensive line. Chris Linderbaum, they drafted 2 years ago. He's been it's like 4 years. God, it's time is flying by. But they just have all the pieces there, and it's just they need to get over that hump. Obviously, last year you had the heartbreaking loss to, Josh Allen. The year before that, you look like you were right there to beat the Chiefs. The defense held them, and mistakes were made, whether it was Lamar's fault or players besides Lamar it was their fault. It just seems like the Ravens have never been able to get it all right at the same time, and I feel like once they do, they'll be unstoppable. And once they get that, I feel like once they get that monkey off their back, the Ravens will truly be unlocked because Lamar won't have that hanging over his shoulder constantly. He won't have the media jawing in his ear. Like, they just need to at least make one Super Bowl. Obviously Lamar, and for all intents and purposes, will probably need to win it to ultimately, shut the media up for good. Even Aaron Rodgers, who only had one ring his entire career, he was able to still get the media to shut up from time to time. But, eventually it kind of caught up to him, and his woes in the championship games definitely caught up to him. But Lamar just needs to break out of that stigma. Once he gets one, I really feel like this team will unlock there's been talks about Harbaugh being on the hot seat, which is kind of crazy to me. It's almost in the same argument as like Mike Tomlin, but there is the argument as well, and I always bring this up. Andy Reid went to 4 straight NFC championship games with the Eagles, got to a Super Bowl and lost it, but and even they let him go after that. So there's always there's I don't want to say time and a place, but there is a moment where it feels right to fire a coach even after a lot of success, and I don't think we're quite there yet with John Harbaugh. But with another, first round, second round playoff exit this year, we very well might be. And it's crazy to say, but I mean, that's ultimately it. Can they get it done in the playoffs? moving over now to the Cleveland Browns. We're going from top to bottom, first place in the division to last place in the division. And for the Cleveland Browns, there was a lot of questions I felt like they could have needed to answer this season. But I think I went with a little bit of a kind of a peculiar one, maybe. Maybe a lot of people have this on their radar, maybe they don't, but I haven't seen too many people talking about this since the trade initially happened. But it's essentially going to be, was the trade worth it? And a lot of people are probably wondering, what is the trade? The trade is ultimately what they did in the draft this year, where they essentially traded Travis Hunter. I know he wasn't officially a Cleveland Brown yet, but that's what the pick was. You know, the number 2 overall pick was going to be Travis Hunter. And the Jags moved up a spot, and the Jags gave up a first-round pick next year to the Browns to take him. So this is a little bit of a two-part question. The first part of it is, if Travis Hunter ends up being, you know, the supreme, you know, generational talent that a lot of people are projecting him to be, Browns fans are going to be in agony because you passed up on that. And you got a solid piece in Mason Graham. And, you know, I feel like him paired with Myles Garrett, you know, that D-line will be a bit better. But Travis Hunter, you know, is a two-way player. There's a lot of, you know, the hype around him. I mean, we saw the talent. The talent is there. Obviously, like I mentioned, the two-way ability. So there's just so much more, you know, the charisma. Like, there's just so much more about Travis Hunter that was more enticing about him. But I personally think the Browns made the right decision because, you know, where there is the crowd that believe Travis Hunter is generational, I'm not personally a part of that crowd. I think he's going to be a good player. He potentially can be a great player, but I think he'll be great at one position. I think eventually he will find a role that he is best at, whether it's wide receiver or cornerback, and the Jags need both, although maybe a little bit more corner because, you know, you do have Brian Thomas Jr. So, you know, I like the idea of him, you know, if he for a career wants to do 85% corner and 15% wide receiver, A-okay with that. 80-20, you know, I'm A-okay with that. There's no way you're going to be able to do a solid 50-50, though, in both positions. I just feel like the risk for injury is too much. I mean, you essentially double it from how much you're going to be on the field. And yeah, I mean, the Browns are going to be hate watching this year. They're going to be hate watching the Jags big time. And I personally believe that the Travis Hunter move for the Jags doesn't move the needle at all. I've never been the biggest fan of Trevor Lawrence. I bring this up every time I talk about him. I get it. Yes, I'm not saying that because he had a massive comeback against my team. If any, I say that was more so the ineptitude of coaching we had than him coming back against us. But whatever. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is the answer. I don't think Travis Hunter is going to make him be the answer in Jacksonville. And if that's the case, now we're looking at, you gave up your first round pick next year. If T-Law isn't the answer, you guys, as the Jags, are screwed. So in that case, you know, if the Jags finish bottom 5 this year, the Browns, because they may also be bottom 5, may have 2 top 5 picks in the draft next year. And that is a lot to jumpstart a team, especially if you think Shedeur is going to be the quarterback. I know a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, you know, that has to be the biggest headline for the Browns this year. Is Shedeur going to be the starting quarterback? I don't think it's that massive of a headline because it's to the point where it's just so overplayed. Like, we clearly see in those preseason games, or in that one preseason game, that Shedeur belongs, and he was making those tight window throws, and he made some rookie mistakes, but he's not worse than 40-year-old Joe Flacco. He's not worse than Kenny Pickett. He's not worse than Dylan Gabriel, and he's not worse than who they bring in? Tyler Huntley, I think they brought in. He's just not. So I truly believe that they will sit him for, I think their bye week is week 9. So they'll sit him for 8 weeks. Once the bye week happens, that's, you know, when they're inevitably 2-6, 1-7, whatever it is, 3-5, they will put Shedeur in and let him kind of ride the rest of the season out, get some in-game reps, you know, and ultimately, again, like I mentioned, if they're picking top 5 and the Jags finish, even if they're picking top 10, you know, they're in a really, really great position for next year. And in this division, they need a quarterback. That's ultimately what it is. They need a quarterback. It's already been announced that Arch Manning isn't coming out next year, so we'll see which quarterbacks are out. You may be able to nab one with either your pick or depending on how good or how bad Jacksonville does with their pick. So we'll see what happens, but that's ultimately the biggest question for me. Will the trade will the trade be worth it for the Browns? Moving on now to the next orange team, the second orange team in this division, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this is probably the biggest wild card team, I would imagine, in this division. The Steelers potentially, but I think they have a little bit more of a guarantee where they're going to finish, more so than the Bengals do. But let's get right into it. So what is the biggest question that the Bengals need to answer this season? And it's, can the defense hold up their end of the bargain? Obviously, we know that Joe Burrow can throw this ball across the field with those two stud wide receivers. They even have a pretty solid third in Andre Isiovas, I think is how you pronounce it. They have Mike Gesicki, and they have another tight end who I'm blanking on the name right now. Chase Brown is a great running back. I mean, like, they have all the pieces to succeed on offense. Defense is an entirely different question. And in my opinion, I have seen so many media outlets having Bengals like top 5, even top 10 team, team rankings wise and their power rankings. And I'm just like, how? In what way? Like, I get it, defensive coordinator change gives you maybe a solid 1 or 2 wins more than they had last year. And that would essentially be enough to get you in the playoffs. But that's assuming Trey Hendrickson is there and playing. That's your best defensive player. If you bring in a new defensive coordinator and you lose your best defensive player in that same fell swoop, I'm sorry, you're not going to get better. That 1 to 2, maybe uptick in wins has now become a 1 to 2 tick in losses. You don't have the league leader in sacks again on your team this year. He's currently holding out. Now, do I think they're going to sign him to a deal? Maybe. I truly don't know, because the Bengals, it would not, I'll put it this way. It would not shock me one bit if the Bengals just let him walk, or if they traded him. Like, not one bit, because that just seems to be how they do business. They finally got Shamar Stewart signed, which if they didn't get that done, I would have been locking this team in for under 7.5 wins, because that defense would not have been able. There would have been no question about it. It would have been the same Bengals team last year, just more expensive. At least now you do have Shamar Stewart, so it is a quote-unquote improvement on the defense. But that's, again, you still don't have Trey Hendrickson. Like, it truly blows my mind that people have them ranked as a top 5 team. They're not even the top team in their division. Like, and we'll get to the Steelers, but if the Steelers end up popping off and Aaron Rodgers goes on a legacy run this year, the Bengals are looking at 3rd in the division. And I'm sorry, in the AFC, you are not making the wild card 3rd in your own division. It's just not happening unless you're, unless that division is the best division in football and, 3 teams are having double-digit wins. Like, I just don't see that happening. So for the Bengals, ultimately, we know Burrow can get it done, offensively with those wide receivers and that, pretty solid run game. A lot of people, you could have gone the direction of, will the O-line hold up? And ultimately, if the O-line doesn't hold up, then this whole thing is over before it even started, because if the O-line can't give Burrow any protection and the defense is going to be as bad, if not worse, than it was last year, it may be a rough offseason next year for the Bengals, because that would have been 3 seasons in a row that you have Joe Burrow, that you have T. Higgins, that you have Jamar Chase, and you don't make the postseason. I'm sorry, but that is unacceptable when you have a quarterback that is regarded by most as a top 5. Some even put him in the top 3, which is, hey, top 4 for sure. I think, the top 3 maybe is more so locked in stone, with, Mahomes, Allen, and Lamar. But I think most people have, or unless you're an Eagles fan, most people have Joe Burrow in that 4 spot. And if you're going, like I said, back-to-back seasons and not making the playoffs with him, the head coach may be looking, Zach Taylor may be, like this background kind of suggests, his seat may be on fire. And if with another, even maybe with a 1st-round exit, honestly, it may be wraps for Zach Taylor. So that is the biggest question for the Bengals going into this season. Can the defense hold up their end of the bargain? And finally, we're getting to it. You already know the yellow and black we got the Steelers, and it's pretty simple for them. Can they overcome the 500 stigma? The Steelers, and this was kind of like what I alluded to earlier in the video, they are essentially locked in. I don't know if people have seen the graphic. I'm sure you have floating around social media right now where it lists all the NFL teams and what the, best case scenario is record wise for every team and what the worst case scenario record wise for each team would be. And for every team besides the Steelers, it's obviously best case scenario 17-0, worst case scenario 0-17. For the Steelers, best case scenario is 9-8, worst case is 9-8. And that just has been the running gag for the Steelers. For how long now? How long has it been since Mike Tomlin's been to the playoffs, or has won a playoff game? They are constantly in it every year in terms of fighting for a spot or making it to the playoffs. And for a lot of years, they really do squeak and sneak in, and we don't know how they do it, but they have to. This question, and the reason why I phrased it like this is because I think Steelers fans would want this. I totally flubbed that one up. Let me restart there. Steelers fans would be happy for this scale to tip either way. Steelers fans, of course, would be elated to, go 13, 14 wins. They're, a top 2 seed in the AFC, and they're looking like a legit Super Bowl contender with Rodgers this year and with that defense, And then it could also tip the complete other way, and I think Steelers fans would still be elated, and that's this team goes 2-3 wins. It's as awful as a lot of people have been saying it'll be. A lot of people have been poo-pooing on the trades as far as for DK and shipping away George Pickens. Obviously, the way it got handled this offseason with Rodgers' contract, and he basically kind of held this franchise captive until he decided he wanted to sign. So there's so many things going into it, but ultimately, I think that is the biggest question for them. And they need to answer it one way or the other, because if you're the Steelers and you finish another year 9-8, 8-9, and I think maybe even 8-9 would be historic, because how long has it been since Mike Tomlin's had a losing record? He obviously can't go 8-8 anymore, and hold that, have that kind of fail safe of going just even. Now you are going to go over 500 or below. There is no in between. So we'll see what happens. I think Steelers fans should hope that they're going to finish as like a 5-win team this year. If the Bengals defense does improve, obviously we know what the Ravens are, and if the Browns can just play spoiler one of those division games against these guys, I think that kind of sets up for a potential 5-6 win season. Again, I think Steelers fans would be very happy with that, and I think also I don't think Mike Tomlin would get fired, but if they did have like a pretty bad season, I feel like he would be on the hot seat next year. Which maybe isn't that fair to him. And I could totally be wrong. The Steelers are known to not fire head coaches. They wait for them to retire, and absolutely, he probably just ownership has maybe already told him, hey, you have this job until you want, until you don't want it anymore. So we'll see what happens. I don't have a lot of faith in them as far as being a great team this year, but like I mentioned, it can go either way for Steelers fans, and they will be extremely happy with the outcome. Just not to be 500 anymore or around that anymore, not being in, purgatory in terms of being able to draft a QB or something like that. So with that all being said, thank you guys. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to watch this video. Please leave your comments down below. Please tell me where I'm wrong. Please tell me some other questions that you think we should be asking about these 4 teams. Are there going to be any surprises in this division this year? Let me know. Let us all know down below. Be sure to check us out on our socials. There is the gang here. And as well, check out Lockdown Defense Sports across all social platforms. We are on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube, and of course Gmail as well. Send us, your video ideas, what you want to see, what you want us to record for you. We of course are here we are but humble servants to you viewers. So thank you guys so much again for tuning in. I want to, it's going to be we're here, guys. It's like 2 more weeks of preseason, and we're here. Football season has arrived. So with that being said, guys, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.